Timberwolves run out of gas in Game 1. Mavs lead the Western Conference Finals. We commiserate next on the Locked On Wolves postcast.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? It's the Locked On Wolves postcast on Locked On Sports Minnesota. I'm Sam Ekstrom, part of the group here at Locked On Sports Minnesota, at Sam Ekstrom on X, joined by special guest host on the postcast. He's the host. He's the daily host of Locked On Wolves, Ben Beecken, at B Beecken on Twitter, and he provides excellent daily analysis on the Minnesota Timberwolves, kind enough to jump in after a Game 1, 108-105 loss in the Western Conference Finals to the Dallas Mavericks. So much to get into. Wolves lead late, can't close the deal. Kyrie starts hot. Luka finishes and daggers the Wolves on a big night from Jaden McDaniels and slow-mo. Wolves stars can't get it done. Cat and Ant outscored by Luka and Kyrie by 28. We'll get into all of that on tonight's postcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Bit of a gut punch, Ben. Wolves lead by 4 late. They storm back after Dallas takes an 8-point lead. Wolves go on a 13-1 run, and then they can't close the deal. 1 field goal in the final 3:37. Luka with some big shots, some sloppy offensive possessions late. This one got away from the Wolves. Extremely winnable Game 1.
Yeah, and I like as fun as the Denver series was. This was like maybe better than any of those games in terms of just like quality of a back and forth, right? Like the Wolves led not big. The Wolves led by multiple possessions early. I think it got up to like 9. Then Dallas led by as many as 8 or 9 in the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, the Wolves, you alluded to the comeback they had. Cat had those big minutes. Nas played well early in the fourth. And then down the stretch, there was still a little bit of back and forth. Like it was a 1-possession game until the final 30 seconds or so. The possessions that stood out to me down the stretch that were just killers were the Wolves got a stop. I think they actually, it was a turnover. They forced a turnover with like a minute and a half left. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick. It was with 2:10 left on the clock. The Wolves were up by 1. They're up 102-101. And Cat punches the ball away from PJ Washington. Then on the other end, the Timberwolves try and go fast. Ant looks like he's going to force something. Instead, he passes it to Jaden, and Jaden gets stuck under the basket and throws it directly to Luke Doncic. They come down and hit a 3 from PJ Washington, take the lead. And then that was right before the Cat offensive goaltending, which was certainly at the point of controversy. I'd call it 50-50, and it, like, legitimately could have gone either way. And that would have tied the game again. And then, of course, the Mavs come down, they score again. Well, actually, I think they turn it over. Then the Wolves turn it over again. Conley had the bad lob that Luka broke up, and then the Mavs score to go up 4. So it legitimately, like, this was a really fun playoff game. It was close. It ends up being a 1-possession game, which we did not see at all in the Denver series, and I don't think we saw in the Phoenix series either. So a good quality of game, just didn't go the Wolves' way. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned it off the top, like stars outscoring the Mavs stars outscoring the Wolves stars. If we want to oversimplify it, I mean, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, a 108-105 final. There were a couple sloppy offense possessions by the Wolves. The Jaden turnover, yes. Conley tries a lob to Gobert that results in a turnover. Ant gassed. Ant had nothing left. Yep. Surprising. And I'm not saying Ant was absent in this game because he packed the box score. A near triple-double. Playmaking throughout the first half. But he had nothing left to offer offensively in the late game clutch time situations. The Reggie Miller was all over it. Yeah. He was parked out by midcourt. He was standing in the corner. And when he was kind of in charge of offensive possessions, there was no ball movement. He was too tired to even try to drive and kick, it seemed like, running the shot clock down. And when the Wolves, I think, had an opportunity to put the stranglehold on, Ant wasn't himself. And I said this on today's Minnesota basketball party. Look out for Game 1, because you're coming off a Super Bowl-like win in Game 7. And we see this so often in sports where high emotion results often lead to emotional letdowns. And I think the Wolves actually brought pretty good energy throughout the night collectively, but Ant had nothing left in the tank to be a finisher in this one. And that's why the ball was in the hands of Jaden, Conley, Rudy, late, Nas. Like a lot of the role players kind of were thrust into those positions because Ant just wasn't able to finish this game strong.
Yeah, and I actually on Locked On Wolves on Wednesday, I said the Wolves would win the series in 6. I also said I thought the Mavs would win game 1, basically for that exact reason. Because the Mavs had an extra, I guess, just one more day of rest, but the Wolves, coming off the game 7 win, a little bit more emotional than what the Mavs, winning in game 6. The Mavs do have the extra day of rest. They've been waiting for Minnesota for that extra day. So they're certainly, and it's such a, like, on the one hand, it's like, well, Ant's 22, they've had 2 days off. Now they only get 1 day off in between each of these games. But also the effort that Ant expends defensively. And I think it was Bill Simmons' podcast I was listening to, and he was talking about Ant fighting through Jokic screens in game 7 and staying attached to Jamal Murray in the second half of that game, and actually game 6 as well. And just how nobody else can do that. And that's 100% true. And it's because of that effort, because he is a two-way player, even though he's a freak athlete, an incredible two-way player, with the extra day of rest. Like at some point, and you're doing the same thing with Kyrie, chasing him all over the place. And Kyrie had, I think, 24 in the first half and only 6 in the half. So Ant did a good job overall on Kyrie. It's not an easy cover at all. So it's understandable that he, got a little bit tired. The thing that stuck out to me, if you just take a step back and look at Ant's offensive performance, there was a lot of standing around, which led to a lot of perimeter jumpers, but the standing around was more second half. Like first half, he was a little bit more involved, and Dallas, it seems like, was a little bit more, they weren't putting 2 on the ball consistently, like what we saw Phoenix do and ultimately Denver, but they were obviously tilting tilting the floor toward him as they should. And Ant was making the right reads overall. He attempted 16 shots in this game. 12 of them were 3-pointers. He only attempted 4 3-pointers, period, or 4 2-pointers in this game, and only 2 of them came in the paint. Very, very weird shot selection from Anthony Edwards, which I think at least partially has to do with his fatigue.
Yeah, Edwards finishes 19, 11, and 8 in 41 minutes. Cat goes 16, 7, and 2, 6 for 20 shooting. They collectively, Wolves stars 12 of 36, 33% shooting for 35 points. Kyrie and Luka, 24 of 49, almost 50% for 63 points. Biggest play of the game, sneakily, a lot of big plays, but I'm choosing to view this as sort of the hinge point. Derek Lively, offensive rebound. Wolves were up 4. Lively with the offensive board that set up the Luka 3 to make it 102-101. It feels like the Mavericks are going to be able to contend with the Wolves' size because of their rebounding. They've got active bigs with good hands. Rudy Gobert's hands, I think, were exposed in that he had a tough time catching in traffic. He got out-jumped at the catch point a lot, and I guess I haven't taken inventory of the final box score. Dallas did out-rebound them in the game, correct? Because they were throughout most of the night. Total rebounds, 48-40. So really, it wasn't close. Dallas wins the rebounding battle. We've got a lot more to get into, including what we thought of the rotations. TNT's crew was ripping the drop coverage. I'd like to run that by you. We'll, of course, talk about a Jaden performance, another Jaden game. This one wasted in defeat, 24 points for Jaden. All of that coming up on the Locked On Wolves postcast. We are brought to you by Game Time tonight. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets to Target Center even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app go down the closer you get to tip-off. So earlier today, getting into Wolves Mavs was around the 240 mark. Getting closer to tip-off, yeah, that thing was creeping down around 200. Killer last-minute deals, up to 60%, in fact, when you buy last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I think the flash deals are really cool, where it's in-app exclusive deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals, you choose the section. Game Time chooses the seats for great savings. You get the all-in price up front, no hidden fees. You see the view from your seat, a nice panoramic. And Game Time ticket coverage will just provide you with outstanding customer service. So what you're going to do is download the Game Time app before game 2, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. It's Sam Ekstrom. It's Ben Beecken. It's the Locked On Wolves postcast. We went in expecting a Kyrie Ant matchup. We expected Jaden Luka. Round 1 goes to Kyrie and Luka. The Wolves had a hard time keeping those guys on the perimeter. They were easily dribbled by. The help, when the Wolves opted to help, the passing was phenomenal. I mean, Dallas was setting up lobs, a lot of rin runs. They knew exactly what to expect. And in the first half, they shot 52%, hung 59 points. Thought the Wolves figured it out a little bit late, shut down Kyrie, but the adjustment was a little bit slow. Early third quarter, the Mavs were still operating at a very high level. So for most of this game, I thought the Wolves had the tactical edge because the Wolves defenders that you're counting on, you're hoping that Ant can put the clamps on Kyrie or Jaden can put the clamps on Luka. Neither of those happened tonight. What'd you think of the matchups and those battles?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think those are the right matchups. I think Ant guards Kyrie for the most part, and I think when Nickeil Alexander-Walker came into the game, he guarded him a little bit, and I think the length of Jaden on Luka did bother him some. Luka didn't start the game shooting well. He obviously got hot late. He had some really tough shots down the stretch. I mean, the 2 that gave them the 4-point lead in the final minute. Jaden had a pretty good contest on that, but that's also a shot Dallas is going to live with because Luka is so good. And so, like, that's a play where, I know you don't want to put 2 on the ball when the game's on the line, but and Jaden McDaniels is second team All NBA or second team all defense. So like I get it, but nobody else on Dallas is beating you in this game. And if you get beat on a semi-open shot that you're scrambling to contest by somebody else, so be it. Overall, though, I thought the point of attack defense was okay, and I think fatigue comes into it again. We just talked about Game 7. I think the pick and roll coverage, we heard Stan Van Gundy talking consistently about the Wolves playing drop coverage and ripping on them for doing it. I mean, they're not going to stop playing drop coverage. And they did mix in, they were blitzing more often than Stan was saying that they were. Like I think they were kind of like, basically when Cat was involved in the action, he was staying at the level for the most part. And when Rudy, it seemed like on the sides of the floor more often, Rudy was coming out and kind of quasi blitzing the pick and roll and forcing the ball to Luka's hands as much as possible. But in the middle of the floor, I mean, that's what Rudy's the best in the league at. And they're not just going to not do it. And I understand that you're going to give up some shots to Luka. Luka's incredible. You're going to give up some shots to Kyrie. Kyrie's great. But it's also a little bit pick your poison, and you don't want to just give them the lobs to Lively and Gafford and everybody as well. So I think the Wolves probably have a similar strategy next game. I think they maybe just blitz a little bit more. Maybe they have Rudy maybe not drop quite so far and at least make Luka think twice. And I know Luka's great at throwing late lobs. It's something that, him and Jokic are probably the best in the league at it. And the Wolves kind of sort of, I don't want to say solved, but at least, combated when Joker tried to throw those lobs. So I don't know that the Wolves adjust the defensive game plan all that much. The killer is that Dallas was 24% on threes. They were 6 of 25. Is that going to happen again? I mean, like, probably not. And they did a pretty good job of defending without fouling overall. But to kind of kick away a poor shooting performance from PJ Washington and others, he was, I guess, the primary culprit there. But that's disappointing. I just don't know that the pick and roll strategy changes all that much other than minor adjustments, like Rudy not dropping quite as far. Maybe you're blitzing a little more often, or you're just like they were for a while. Cat was, when he was involved in the actions, he would kind of hedge and recover. But of course the Mavs were trying to get Rudy away from the rim. So they were trying to get Rudy's man to set the screen to get Rudy in the pick and roll. So I don't know that we see a drastic change. I mean, they lost this game by 3. It easily could have gone either way. It's not a surprise that Kyrie and Luka both scored 30. So a lot of what ended up actually happening is kind of something the Wolves would take. It's just, some of the fatigue factoring in and some of the, some of those silly turnovers late and Dallas making some tough shots. I mean, those things happen in the playoffs.
Yeah, it looked a lot like the game that Dallas beat the Wolves in the regular season. That was 115-108 when Luka and Kyrie both played the lone time it happened. And again, it was late game execution. Dallas did it better than Minnesota. They won that game. They won tonight by 3. And it's hard to really, and people are debating in the comments, like which thing is going to regress back to the mean, right? Is Ant kind of guaranteed to play a little better, Cat a little more efficient, or is Dallas guaranteed to shoot better from outside the arc? They were 40% in the Thunder series. They've made the third most threes in basketball, and tonight they were 24%. I got to think that Dallas is going to hit some of those open looks, and they had a number of them that didn't fall in this game. But for rotation-wise, like just looking at the bench, Dallas actually went 10. They got a little Dante Ekstrom in there as well for 3 minutes. They played 10. Wolves played 8. If you're giving out grades, Slow-Mo gets an A. Slow-Mo, fantastic in 17 minutes, 5 of 8, hit a 3, hit some floaters, made some good defensive plays. Nas quite good, 15 and 5. They need something from Nickeil. I mean, Nickeil is kind of a heat check 3-point shooter. He's going to put up 4 to 8 per game, and he's had 4 games now in the past 8 where he went 0 for. And he's 0 for his last 9. I know he since he banged up the shoulder, I don't know which game it was, the Denver series, he banged up the shoulder, hasn't looked quite the same. And I think you could say the same for Conley, that he's also playing with that calf strain that we know about. The guys that have gotten banged up looked a little banged up tonight for the Wolves.
Yeah, and that's part of having a deep playoff run. And I guess thankfully at this point, the Phoenix series is only 4 games, but the Denver one going 7 and playing at altitude and playing a physical series, like that's all part of it. And obviously every team, Dallas only played 1 less game in the last series, although the physicality was maybe a little bit of a different level with OKC, but yeah, the Nickeil thing is big. I mean, he's been hot or cold in these playoffs. Like he finished the Denver series going 0-5 from 3 in game 7, and he was 0-4 in this game. So he's missed his last 9, I guess, depending on how he finished game 6 against Denver. But like the 2 games before that, he was a combined 7 of 13 from outside the arc. The 2 games before that, he was a combined 0 of 7. So he's been streaky. It's been feast or famine. This game, there were a couple he took that I immediately just was like, no, just screamed no. Like that's a bad shot. There was one fourth quarter. It was an early in the possession shot. I think it was like Ant kind of terminated a drive and turned and kicked it to Nickeil, who was on the move, like in the slot just above the break, and kind of not an on-balance attempt. And it was just a bad shot. And Nickeil, usually when he's going well, you're right about him being a heat check guy, but he gets a couple of open corner threes. He drains those. And then from that point forward, like he doesn't need to see the rim from the corners, and he just makes them. And that hasn't been the case the last couple of games. His minutes have also gone down drastically in the last few games. Like he was playing, you look back, the whole Phoenix series, he played at least 29 minutes in every game. Up through game 5, when they got down 3-2 to Denver, he had still played at least 23 minutes in every single game. The last 3 games, 17 minutes, 17 minutes, and 16 minutes. And again, of his last 9 from outside the arc, he did make one tough layup in this game when I think they gambled and tried to steal. Dallas did, and he ended up making a reverse layup. But yeah, I mean, they need something from Nickeil, because that's like Dallas isn't. They're going to play 10 guys. They don't really have more than 7 that they're excited about playing. I mean, you could argue Jaden Hardy's fine. The Wolves are kind of in the same boat where they should have 8 that they're good playing. And Kyle Anderson was awesome. I mean, Dallas was clearly just, they were putting Luke on him and just not guarding him, and which is the right strategy if you're Dallas. But they were like still not guarding him when he was wide open at the free throw line. And then it was like, all right, I mean, Slow-Mo could make this shot. And he even hit a corner 3 in this game. So Slow-Mo was great. He did everything he needed to do. He also guarded Luka and did a really good job. I'd be interested to see the stats when guarding Luka. I'm pretty sure he was like 0 of 2 or 1 of 3 or something like that with Slow-Mo guarding him. So great Kyle Anderson game. This is a very good series for him. It's still going to be limited impact, right? He's still not going to play more than 20 minutes in any game. It's important, and he did his part in this game, and was an impressive performance overall from Kyle Anderson.
Sorry about that. We will talk about the Jaden McDaniels performance, best player on the floor for the Wolves tonight, offensively at least. And we'll start looking at game 2, tie up some odds and ends on the Locked On Wolves postcast. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all have stressors in our life, big and small. When we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest, figure out how to work through whatever might be weighing you down. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, switch therapists for any time for no additional charge. Make sure the situation's right for you so you can process, learn positive coping skills, setting boundaries, empowering yourself. It's for the big and little things in life. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. The Jaden McDaniels experience continues to be spectacular. A third consecutive 20-plus point game. He had never done it twice in a row. Now he's done it 3 times in a row. He was 15 of his last 19 shots from the field coming in. So that would make him now 24 of his last 34. He goes 6 of 9 from 3, 24 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. The one peculiarity, he was a -4 in this game. It seemed like defensively, he wasn't, and we'll have to look at the analytics on how he actually performed one-on-one against Luka. It felt like Luka won this battle. I mean, we talked about that in segment 1, that Jaden, as long as his arms are, as good as the closeouts were at times against Luka, he has a knack for getting the shot off no matter what. He's almost an unblockable player. It's frustrating to watch when you're cheering against him. But your thoughts on Jaden's performance overall?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about earlier, like sometimes, top 5 players in the league are going to make shots, and for the most part, I thought Jaden's defense was good. There were a couple where, Luka, not more than a couple, where Luka got him on his back, and I thought Jaden did about as good of a job as he could contesting. He ended up with 4 personal fouls. I can only think of 2 shooting fouls he committed on Luka. I could be wrong, but I think he did a pretty good job, and the officials were allowing, at least in the first half, these guys to play a little bit. And Jaden, I thought, was as physical as he could be with Luka, because Luka, that's the main advantage that Doncic is going to have. And that's what we all talked about, before the series, was the length is great, but it's a different animal than guarding, Devin Booker or Jamal Murray, where you can overwhelm them with length because they don't have the physicality or, frankly, the passing chops of Luka, because Luka had he had several incredible passes in this game. He ended up with 8 assists, but he had more. Left more on the floor. His teammates left more on the floor for him. Offensively, I was surprised Jaden only had 3 assists when it was all said and done. Because could think of a couple off the top of my head. The one where he got the offensive rebound, took a hard dribble to the middle and kicked it to Ant for a 3-pointer. I think it was when they were trailing in the 4th quarter. It was a really nice play. There was another, he had a dump off to Rudy where it was kind of the same deal, where these are the plays. And obviously we're year 4 of the Jaden experience, and this isn't year 1, year 2 Jaden, but to see the growth from early on in his career, it was pump fake, take a dribble, shoot a long contested 2. And then it became catch and shoot. And that's the only thing he did. And then it was either shoot a 3 or drive to the basket, which is great. But now he's added this element. I'm not saying he's going to be a playmaker frequently, but the fact that he's now looking to make those passes, and 3 assists isn't anything to get over the moon about, but those plays, those reads, the pass to Rudy, I thought Jaden had an 8-foot floater wide open, and he instead passed it to Rudy for a dunk. So I thought the plays he was looking to make, save for that really bad turnover in the final minute that we talked about at the very beginning. Besides that, this was almost a perfect Jaden game. And like you said, 20 plus in 3 straight games, shooting the lights out. He shot 38% in the Denver series from 3. But that game 1 performance, when he had 0 points on 0 of 7 shooting against Denver, that feels like 2 years ago. And since then, he's been double figures in 6 of 8 games since that point, 9 or more in 7 of 8 games. And just this is a really well-rounded game. And I think he can be a little better defensively against Luka, but Luka's still going to make shots. I think we're not trying to make excuses with the Wolves being tired. There's also you have to give credit to the other team because it's the playoffs and they're going to make incredible shots. There were a lot of places the Wolves left stuff on the floor, free throw shooting's another one. They were 11 of 18 from the line, which that happens sometimes, but Like Conley missed a technical free throw. He obviously missed the one at the end that would have given them at least a snowball's chance to win the game with 1.7 on the clock, but he missed that free throw. So overall, Conley ended up being 1 of 4 with one being an intentional miss. Nas split 2 trips to the line. So in a game where neither team's shooting a ton of free throws, to lose that by 5 in a 3-point game really hurts too. So I think this is more a function of Luka is incredible. And that's kind of where my mind goes to with this game. And as we talked about earlier, I don't know how many major adjustments the Wolves actually make. I think it's more just, the offensive flow and getting more involved early in the offensive flow needs to be improved.
It frustrating too to lose that game when Luka cannot move. He can't in defensive transition. He can't move. He is not a defensive asset whatsoever. So you got to find a way to exploit that more. Wolves only able to score 105. I'm guessing the offensive analytics are not going to be kind tonight. Wolves only shoot 42%. One other peculiarity, and this happened a lot in the Denver series too. Wolves get outscored in the paint, 62-38, and you think to yourself, oh, Rudy, bad game, man. And you look at the box score, and he's a plus 10. Like, I mean, Rudy Gobert, a plus 10 in this game when it didn't feel like he was really that impactful or keeping Denver away from the rim like you would want, and he still comes out with by far the best on-off number for the Timberwolves.
Yeah, there were a couple of those. So and actually I think I'm going to do this, go back and watch the 10 minutes that he didn't play. I remember there was one, I want to say it was second quarter, when the Wolves went on a little bit of a run toward the end of the quarter, if I remember right. Rudy was off the floor, and then he was going to enter the game, and like play didn't stop for like another long period of time, and he couldn't get back in the game. And then there was that other, like in the fourth, when I think it was the fourth quarter, when the Wolves had a lead, and then Dallas made a quick push, like a quick 6-0 run. Rudy immediately popped back up off the bench. So yeah, I mean, Rudy's, it's all like, it all counts the same, right? So both can be true, where Dallas, Rudy may not have had his best game, and I don't think he did. I think he was maybe, like we talked about, I think he was dropping maybe a little too far. And there were a couple of those where like Lively and Gafford were physical with him. And I don't think Rudy was as physical back as he was in the Denver series. I think maybe I don't know if he was surprised by their strength, by their, athleticism, whatever. There were moments of that, but that just goes to show how bad it was when he was off the floor. And we talked earlier in passing, like Nas had a really great stretch that was important in the fourth quarter, to the point where I was wondering if Cat was going to come back for him at all. But Nas was a -11. And this is part of the tricks that single game plus minus can play when it comes to individual players. But there's a lot of truth to the interior defense. Just, well, it was not great with Rudy in the game. It was awful with him out of the game. And that's where this, both can be true, as I said. And the discrepancy, like you mentioned, points in the paint, 62-38, according to this box score. That's crazy for a team with Rudy Gobert. But you also have to credit the Mavs rim protectors. I mean, Gafford and I thought especially Lively were really, really good in the paint. Like the Wolves just weren't, and I haven't seen the full tally on paint attempts. We already said Ant only had 2 official paint attempts, and he missed both of them. I was shocked that the Wolves were, it's seemingly afraid to get all the way to the basket against those guys. And even still, Dallas finished this game with 8 blocks. The Wolves only had 3, which isn't always the best measure of rim protection. But in this game, I think it's a pretty accurate measure. I would say that Dallas's rim protection was 2.5 times better. They had 2.5 times more blocks. Like that's basically what this was their guys were great. The Wolves were not. And when Rudy was not in the game, there was no rim protection. There was no paint protection for Minnesota at all.
I don't know if you know like the average foul total in a given game, but 32 fouls were called in this game. No one really was in foul trouble. It was really tough to get a whistle at the rim. I mean, the Wolves, I thought when they did try, they were not just going to give you a complimentary, 2 shots. You had to earn the fouls tonight. Ant with 2 free throw attempts, Cat with 2 free throw attempts. So that probably discouraged them a little bit as the Wolves fall 108-105. And yeah, make your free throws too, guys. Come on. One just random odd and end. I thought it was interesting that the Wolves didn't foul with like 40 seconds left, down 4. And I know it worked out. They got a rebound, but also they lost 20 seconds. What was your thought on that?
I thought it was my guess is, I don't know this, but my guess is that they weren't going to foul Luka or Kyrie, who were going to have the ball in their hands. And they were probably like, hey, let's try and trap them. Let's try and make them, if the opportunity presents itself, make them make a tough pass and try and get a turnover, because Dallas can be turnover prone for stretches. They actually turned it over 3 more times than Minnesota in this game. And that's one of their weaknesses. And Kyrie and Luka are such good players and such good free throw shooters that I think it was like, let's just play defense. And it did work out. And then they still, and they also almost stole the inbound then on the next possession. Mm-hmm. But then a kind of low key mistake there was Conley almost steals. What's that?
Oh, he's got to foul Derek Jones.
Derek Jones Jr. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I know he was so focused on getting the tip away, but then it was like he tried to regain his balance before. And it's like, no, just reach out and grab him and make the, 70-ish% free throw shooter shoot it versus I think it ended up being Kyrie. So that was a mistake too. I think I was okay with them not fouling. In fact, I was doing it in my, the math in my head. I was like, you know what? I wouldn't foul here. Try and make them make a tough pass or make a tough shot or make a non-star player make a shot. And that part worked out. And then of course it comes down to it and Conley can't make, at that point it was desperation, but misses the free throw anyway. So late game execution wasn't, I guess if you extend it to that Jaden turnover and the Conley turnover on the lob, those were not great. In the final minute when they were trying to play catch up, I was okay with how they handled it. They did waste that timeout on the inbound, which I thought actually Stan Van Gundy made a great point about Slow-Mo being the inbounder. Like, you're not worried about him at all. So don't guard him, play 5-on-4 on the floor. That was a really great point. And the Wolves ended up could have used that timeout when there was a 2-point game. Or I guess it would have been a 2-possession game still, but the timeout would have been helpful later because it limited what then they could do in that free throw situation for Conley because they didn't have it. So there were a couple of those small misses that, may have not made a difference in the long run, but notable nonetheless. And Dallas just over the final couple of minutes, Luka especially just out executed Minnesota.
This will be the subtle but effective game because apparently that was the Mark Davis ruling on the Conley review.
Yeah.
Wolves.
I didn't like that they challenged that, but it was also a weak call. So
Wolves were up 5 at the time. Felt like they had momentum. They don't get that call, and then Luka goes on a 7-0 run immediately after as part of a 13-0 run overall. I know the Wolves battled back, actually took a 4-point lead, so that's not the be-all end-all. But I choose to view that as another arbitrary turning point. I'm full of them. I'm full of the arbitrary turning points. Ben, thank you for filling in tonight. People can check out your show, Locked On Wolves, daily for excellent, fantastic deep dives on the Minnesota Timberwolves. You can hear this show as well on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe as well on YouTube to Locked On Sports Minnesota. Friday night, Luke Inman, the Postmaster General, makes his triumphant return from a European vacation. I'm sure he'll be rejuvenated. For Ben, for myself, Sam Ekstrom, we say thank you for watching live, for being in the chat, and we will talk to you after Game 2 on the Locked On Wolves postcast.